cold slither, you'll be joining us soon. Band of vipers playing a tune. Ahoy, suicidalists! 'Tis I, Brian White, editor-in-chief of Cinema Suicide, and we're back this week with our regularly scheduled program. I've got a new review for your ass this week. It's one that I'm pretty excited to talk about for the last couple of weeks. And in just a couple of minutes, I'm going to get to telling you all about the ABCs of death. But first, El Picor. Last Sunday saw the season premiere of Dexter on Showtime. And this is looking to be the final season in what has been a pretty good series. The last couple of seasons have left me feeling a little cold. I really don't feel like it's lived up to its potential. And there's a little too much emphasis on the woe and anxiety of being Deb Morgan. And things aren't really all that different in this season premiere. She is just as grating as ever, if not a little more grating. Now, Dexter really seemed to hit its peak in season 4 with that whole Trinity arc. That was a great season of television right there, and ever since then it's been on a kind of slow, gentle downward spiral, and these days it's not a bad way to kill a little time, but my expectations for this season are not exactly high. It's the usual Deb Morgan sob story. Ever since they introduced that almost incest angle, it's almost like the writers didn't really know what to do with it, because that story is just kind of dead in the water. It's a convenient plot device to provide tension between Dexter and Deb. But it goes nowhere. But at least we get Charlotte Rampling, who you might know from movies like The Night Porter, Zardoz. She plays a serial killer specialist who's consulting with the police on their latest big bad. And it turns out that she's actually there to get close to Dexter, who by some mysterious manner has managed to find out everything there is to know about him, including his dark passenger. I'm hoping for a big finish here, so I guess we'll see what happens. The ABCs of Death is an anthology horror movie from producers Tim League and Ant Timpson for Drafthouse Films, which is quickly becoming one of my favorite contemporary production houses. The idea stated at the beginning of the movie is that 26 directors were each given a letter of the alphabet, and then they were given complete artistic freedom to make a short horror film based on a word that starts with that letter. And so, from A to Z, we watch their shorts, and the results are, well, they're mixed. For instance, Nacho Vigalondo turns in A is for Apocalypse, which is about a woman who clumsily attempts to murder a sick man who's confined to his bed for some really cryptic reasons. Then there's F is for Fart from director Noboru Iguchi, which is about a schoolgirl who, I shit you not, escapes a deadly cloud of volcanic gas by climbing into her teacher's ass. And then there's O is for Orgasm, which is a really obtuse short about a woman having an orgasm in extreme close-up, and intercut with all the scenes are shots of like whips and cigarettes popping bubbles which erupt from her mouth at the height of ecstasy. It's a really good idea, and horror has always been home to short film anthologies. You ever notice you don't see action movie or romantic comedy anthologies? Because that would be really fucking stupid. It's always horror and science fiction, and short horror is a really great way to reveal the strengths and weaknesses of any given director, since you don't have a whole lot of time to establish a complicated narrative or anything. This is firmly on display, since the average running time of a short in ABCs of Death is somewhere in the neighborhood of 5 minutes, and there are some really great, really original ideas at play in this movie. Unfortunately, there are even more of them which run the gamut from unbearably lazy to really fucking weird to just downright stupid. I'm looking at you, W is for WTF. But let's start with the good. D is for Dogfight is probably the highest point in the entire picture. It is from director Marcel Sarmiento, and it is about a man wearing the dog tags bearing name of a missing dog, and he's in an underground illegal fight against a dog. and people bet money, and he fights the dog, and there's a really unusual outcome. And the whole thing is shot in slow motion. And it is both beautiful and disgusting to watch. There's also I is for Ingrown, which is about a bound woman who was murdered in a particularly gruesome way by a man who's presumably her husband. There's L is for Libido, which is really, really extreme and very unpleasant to watch, as is X is for XXL by Xavier Gens, but what do you expect from the guy who brought you Frontiers? There's also some really unusual ones in the form of the letter R from the director of a Serbian film, and P is for Pressure, which is an outstanding short, but it's a little bit out of step with the rest of the films, as it's not particularly horrifying. It's actually a bit of a heartbreaking human story about a mother in a really tough spot. Now, each one of these movies is really clever or very unique or really nice to look at. What some of these directors have done in the span of 5 minutes is really amazing, and it makes the entire picture worthwhile. Now, it would be helpful to know ahead of time which ones are the good ones and which ones are the bad ones, because the bad ones, they can be pretty bad. Now, the worst of the bunch is easily Ty West's M is for Miscarriage, which this is a director who in only a couple of films has managed to define his entire career with an acute eye for detail and a real sense of atmosphere, and none of that is on display in this short at all, not even close. It's almost like he hired an intern to make a movie in an afternoon, and this is the result. It's startlingly lazy. Other lame entries include Adam Wingard's Q is for Quack. Adam is a director whose feature Pop Skull I reviewed several years ago, and I really enjoyed it. But again, this is just a movie that's like a third-person account of how hard it is to make a movie like Q. There's also John Schnepp's W is for WTF, which is just like excessive. Now, unfortunately for the ABCs of death, the losers outweigh the winners. And while they're not necessarily deal breakers, you tend to have to sit through 3 or 4 bland or stupid shorts in order to find the good ones. Or it's something like the short V is for Vagitus, which is just really out of step with the rest of the anthology's theme. Unfortunately, there are some real ugly ducklings among the bad ones. And they're not necessarily bad, they're usually just insane and Japanese, like F is for Fart, J is for Jitageki, and Z is for Zetsumetsu especially. Japanese horror and horror comedies is a bit of an acquired taste, and a couple of these shorts come from members of that Sushi Typhoon group who are responsible for some really zany, fucked up shit, some of which I've actually liked. There's also a couple of animated shorts, like K is for Klutz from director Anders Morgenthaler, about a woman who chases a turd around her bathroom as it refuses to be flushed. And then there's also T is for Toilet from director Lee Hardcastle, which is a really twisted and unpleasant piece of claymation that reminds me of something from a Spike and Mike's Twisted Film Festival. And then there's H is for Hydroelectric Diffusion, and I don't even know what to say about that one. It's got furries. Now, ABCs of Death is actually a really good idea that's just flawed in its execution. It could have really benefited from a tightening of the rules instead of just letting these directors go nuts. There's something really special in there, but it needs a bit of conformity from piece to piece. It can be really jarring as you lurch out of a zany, spastic, gory comedy into something really dire and filthy. There's also really long stretches of bad shorts that can make watching the ABCs of Death a bit of a slog, but there's also some gold in there, like really worthwhile stuff. It's just a little hard to find among this pile of uninspired trash. So there you have it, the ABCs of Death from Drafthouse Films. As of this recording, it's streaming on Netflix, so in spite of the bad stuff, go ahead and watch it. There's some really, really good shorts in there. And then come back here and let me know down in the comments which were your favorite shorts. And then, let me know what else I should review. As always, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you next Friday.